next up have Tom Francis, who you may know, the designer, writer, and coder of Gunpoint, Heat Signature, and Tactical Breach Wizards, which is one of my favorite names of a game. So, welcome to the stage, Tom.
Hello, I'm Tom. This is Heat Signature. It's a game we released a few years ago. It's a roguelike in space where you take jobs from clients to break into spaceships as they're flying around the galaxy. You're usually trying to steal something, rescue somebody, kill somebody, that kind of thing. And so one of the first things I needed to think about was how are we going to generate these ships? You know, random generation, I want it to be fresh forever, right? I want it just endlessly new and different experiences for all time. And my ambitions with the level generation sort of started actually a bit lower than that and then just went lower and lower and lower as this project went on. Because my first thought was that, first of all, I established that they needed to actually feel like levels. They shouldn't just feel like spaceships, because it turns out if you make something that feels like a place and doesn't feel like a level, you don't really have a game. Like, games kind of need levels. And of course, I had to drill down into like, what do I even mean by that? What is a level? What is it that makes a level feel like a game? And what's the essential like backbone of it? So, in the context of like spaceships, I reckoned that the simplest kind of structure I could have was, I'm saying the simplest kind of structure with this slide up, was for gates and keys. You can see how quickly my plans went awry. Basically, that the progression you make towards your objective, that's the thing that makes it feel like a level. You need to make progression. It's sort of in chunks. You get closer to your objective without immediately reaching it and without being completely stuck. So my implementation of that for spaceships was that it should be a series of gates and keys. So in the place where you dock, this is this little docking point here, this airlock is where you start. This is a security 1 zone. So somewhere in here there's a level 1 key card, and then all of the doors out of here are level 1 doors. Actually, they're not all level 1 doors. And that's part of why this system sucks. Is like, once you have the level 1 key, you're going to go to the security zone 2, you're going to get the level 2 key. But boy, it's quite complicated, isn't it? And that's why I did it this way. I wanted it to be complicated. I wanted it to be intricate. I thought, like, if zone 1 can, tessellate interestingly with zone 2, then the next ship, they'll tessellate differently. And the ships will be more different, and there'll be more interesting differences between your missions. And that sucked. Because, first of all, the interesting differences there are not that interesting. And actually, they're kind of worse than boring. It's just annoying. You dock with a ship, and you just got to sit there, like, puzzling out, where do I even need to go? I want to get to zone 8, but how do I get there? Because zone 4 is not where I'd expect it to be. And, like, that's not interesting gameplay. It's just a chore. So the differences are not just boring. They're actually actively annoying. And then the other problem with it is that the zone I'm in is what I need to be worrying about moment to moment. I need to be thinking about that. I don't need to think about the whole ship. Great. But the zone I'm in, I do need to be thinking about that all the time I'm in it. So I need to see it. I need it all on screen. And to see all of these interestingly shaped zones, whichever zone you're in, if it's a weird shape, you've got to zoom way out to keep it all on screen. So you're viewing the game kind of like this, like at this horrible zoom level where I can't even tell which is the enemies and which is me. You can barely even see that there are people here. It's terrible. So I simplified drastically. Like, each security zone is just going to be pretty self-contained. It's going to be basically a rectangle so that it fits on the screen. All the stuff I need to worry about as a player, I can see at this zoom level, where this isn't the best screenshot to illustrate it, but in theory, if this wasn't a cropped, larger screenshot, these people would not be heat signatures and they would be visible. And you can see John Roberts' wonderful art, and the whole thing looks very nice. So that means keeping it very, very simple. So there's just a key, there's some guards, there's a locked door. That's it. So that's one zone, and like I say, that was a cropped version of another shot. This is the full shot with the zones labelled on it. So here's a level 1 zone, here's level 2, level 3. There's choice of level 3s, a bit of branching. And your objective will be somewhere in sort of 3, 4, or 5. So you can work your way through this. So what I want you to notice about this is that it's absolutely miserably boring. There's nothing interesting about this. It is just nuts and bolts. It just does its job. It's just like, it's structure. I needed structure, now there's some structure, great. The problem is, like, this structure is very boring. And then if we go back to the last slide, the individual segments are also very boring. So we have really like a boring tapestry of smaller, boring elements. And it solves all my design problems. Like, all those problems are solved now. But we are left with not that much breathing room to generate interesting differences in the levels themselves. The level generator, bless its heart, was doing its best, but I really kind of restricted it to these tiny little spaces where it just doesn't have a lot to play with. So the question on my mind was, how do we make the game fresh when the levels are going to be, well, the differences between the levels are going to be kind of this trivial nonsense. Yeah, let me just illustrate what kind of differences I'm talking about. This is in heat signature's practice mode, it'll generate just one zone, so you can just play a little like short, no stakes game. And so I'm just going to tab through a bunch of these just so you can see how one ship differs to the next. It's just rooms and corridors in different orders, different layouts, different guards. That's about it. So yeah, thinking about how do we turn that into like endlessly fresh experiences, I came to this. If you can't make the shuffle interesting, make more interesting cards. Because this level generator really, I've taken its legs out from under it so badly that all it can really do is shuffle some walls around. And it got me thinking about shuffling a deck of cards. You know, every card game has random generation in it, right? You shuffle a deck. And you make those games interesting not by doing more interesting shuffles, by more intelligently placing the king just where you want it in the deck. You do it by making the cards mean more interesting things, and preferably, if you're not playing with just a regular deck of playing cards, in other board games and stuff, you make the cards themselves interesting. The cards have interesting new rules on them and stuff like that. So then we've got to think about what are the cards in the context of heat signature, a game where you are flying through space, boarding spaceships, sneaking through them. It's kind of stealth focused, but emergent gameplay focused as well, and so kind of play how you want. I think the three kinds of card in that context are player tools, enemy traits, and global filters. So player tools, that's all of the player's verbs. It's everything you can do. In heat signature, there are no innate abilities. Everything you can do is because of an item you have. So the tools are the abilities. It's all of the things the player can do. Enemy traits, things like shields, armor, various ways the enemies might be able to push back at you or avoid you or detect you. And then global filters, I won't explain what a filter is just yet. I'll explain that when I get to it. So for tools, what are shuffle-friendly player tools? What kind of player tools are good if you just put them into a shuffled environment? So obviously between different tools, you want to vary what effect they have. Obviously, I think that's kind of where we'd all start. But I think we also want to look at the constraints and the freedoms. So I think in terms of, a teleporter is a device that has a freedom you don't normally have. You can teleport through walls. You can get to somewhere you couldn't normally get to. And it'll be constrained in some way, like range is the obvious one. All of the gadgets in heat signature are constrained by range to some extent or another. And a teleporter by itself, even with that constraint and freedom, it's quite boring because those two things, they sort of relate to the layout of the level, but they don't really interact with it. Like, it doesn't matter how the level is laid up, you'll always be able to teleport to anywhere within that range with a conventional teleporter. So to drill down into what I mean by constraints and freedoms and how they can affect an item and make them interestingly different, teleporters is actually a good example because there are three kinds of teleporters in heat signature and none of them do what I just said. So the first one is a sidewinder. Sidewinder, you can click anywhere within range and you'll teleport there if you have a path there. In other words, if you could have walked there without having to open any doors or clear any obstacles or anything like that. So you can go straight past, this is an automated turret, there's 3 guards there, I can go past all of those, they won't see me, they won't hit me, I'm completely safe, and it will be instantaneous, I won't actually walk around this thing, but I need the route to exist, so it's sort of as if your atoms are being beamed along that path, but it's all instantaneous. So that one is constrained by pathing, you need a path, but it bypasses time and detection and a bunch of other things like line of sight as well. The swapper can take you through solid walls. You don't need a path, but you do need someone to swap with. So it's constrained by guard positions. It matters where the people are. And of course, that's something that's going to change every time the level's regenerated. Every time we generate a new level, the guards will be in different places. But also it's going to change during your run, right? The guards are going to be walking around. So where you can swap to is going to be a very dynamic thing. So it's constrained by that and bypasses time, bypasses pathing, and line of sight. And then the last one is the visitor. Visitor doesn't need pathing. It doesn't need guards. It really does just take you to exactly where you click. And its only constraint is time. And by that, I don't mean that it's slow to take you there. I mean that it will only take you there for a while. After 3 seconds of using it, you're teleported back to where you came from. And so then its utility is very dependent on where you're teleporting to. Like, what is that environment like? In this example, I'm safe there. When I teleport in, no one's going to see me or anything. But for my visit here to be useful, I haven't permanently gone into this higher security zone. I'm not there. I'm just visiting. So I would need to get down to this keycard guy. I hope you can see my cursor. Down in the bottom right. I need to steal his key, but he's actually kind of covered by other people, so it's really not a great spot for a visitor because I would have 3 seconds to find a way to get that key off him. But if I had a key cloner, which is a device that can clone keys at short range through walls, it has a bypasses collision and is constrained by range. that would be perfect. I could visit, grab the key, teleport back, and now, okay, I'm not in that zone, but I've got the key to that zone now, so I can get in there. So for enemy traits, it's really the same philosophy. It's about bypasses and constraints. So some enemies have heat sensors. That bypasses the line of sight requirement. Normally a guard can only see you if they can see you. With a heat sensor, they can know you're there even if they don't have line of sight, but it's constrained by range. It has a much shorter range than their vision range, so if they want to see you through a wall, they have to be pretty close to you. Glitch Dash, it bypasses distance and time constrained by detection. A Glitch Dash is a trait the guards can have, which means as soon as they hear a suspicious sound, they're going to teleport to it. So it actually doesn't matter how far away that sound was. Obviously, they need to have heard it, so there's some range considerations there. But in terms of the Glitch Dash itself, they can teleport as far as they like, and it's instantaneous. And it being instantaneous might not sound too wild in itself, but when you play, anyone who has played Heat Signature and encountered this, it's always surprising. No matter how ready you think you are for it, like 5 guards just teleporting to the room the second you make a noise is this instant oh fuck situation. So it bypasses distance and time, but it's constrained by detection. They need to know you're there. They need to have some reason to teleport in. And then in an update, we added an enemy type called the Tracker, which always knows where you are. As soon as you're aboard the ship, it knows you're there. It is walking towards you, usually from the other end of the ship. It's going to have to walk all the way through the whole ship, so it's constrained by pathing. It needs to have a route to you. And by time, it's going to take a while to get there. It doesn't even run. It's a very methodical thing. But it bypasses detection. It doesn't need to hear you. It doesn't need to see you. It just knows you're there. And the pathing part of that gets really interesting because you get to see its path. So you know exactly where it's going to walk. So you can kind of juke it and trick it and lay traps and stuff like that. So filters, I will explain that now. I define a filter as a global change that warps the player's experience of the same content, in this case, the same level. So what changes can we make that would make the same level play differently? We're never going to make you play the same level twice, but if we can make filters that do that, then we can add more freshness to the levels, even if the levels don't have interesting differences inherently. So mission clauses, every time you take a mission, the highest paid ones will have an extra clause. You only get the full pay if, for example, you don't kill anyone. Or one of them is no witnesses. So if anyone does see you, you've got to kill them. And then the hardest one is ghost. Don't harm anyone or let them see you. That is brutal, and I probably don't need to explain why that completely transforms a level. A level that would have been trivial before is now, it's not just harder, you have to think about it completely differently. Even the easiest, least armored guard is just as bad a threat as the nastiest boss, because seeing is failure. Each ship also has its own alarm type, so when you do trip the alarm, something different happens on different ships. So the default one is it just heads to a nearest space station, which means you have a time limit to finish your mission and get out of there before it docks at the space station and you're captured. Obviously, adding a time constraint to a game that doesn't normally have it radically changes all of your considerations. All of your plans go out the window. You have to suddenly start thinking about, like, you still can't really afford to just go guns blazing usually. So it becomes like a speed stealth thing of like, how can I just kind of dart through this room and just distract someone just for a second, just so I can get this done before I get caught. But if your mission is to rescue somebody or, to assassinate somebody or capture somebody, you have a human target that you're trying to get to. One of the alarm types is the target will flee when the alarm is triggered. So there'll be a teleporter pad somewhere on the ship and they're going to run to the teleporter pad and escape. And once that happens, your mission's failed. But of course, where is the teleporter pad? I've had missions where it's closer to me than the target is. So if I can get to the teleporter pad first, then I actually want to set off the alarm because the guy's going to come to there and I can just lay a trap and get him at that point. And then some of them just don't have an alarm at all, which means it completely changes all of the stealth considerations. Like now, being detected is still risky. You know, people are going to shoot you. Guards are going to come running if they hear shots, but there's no long-term consequence for it. If you can manage that situation, if you can control who heard you just now, you get away with it. And then it can even be like a tool that you use to lure people because there's no longer this heavier cost. And then character traits. We added these in an update. When you start a run of Heat Signature, you're always playing as someone new. We randomly generate characters. And at launch, that was just inventory items, but later we added these traits. So that is going to define your whole run. It's going to apply a lens, apply a filter to everything that character ever does. So one of them is glitch sick, which means anytime you teleport, you just pass out for a few seconds. So teleporting into a combat situation is no longer an option. Teleporters then become a much more of a sort of subtle tool of like, okay, it's just about getting to somewhere, getting to an empty room and then having some time to recover before I do anything else. Technophobe means nothing recharges. So all of the best items in Heat Signature are rechargeable gadgets. The best ones are self-charging, where the charge just constantly generates. If you're a technophobe, you don't know how to recharge those things and you're too afraid to ask. So everything is disposable to you. So all items are equally like trashed. It's just all garbage. You can still use it. You get all the full uses out of it, but you just can't get the uses back. And so you have to constantly vary your tactics because it's just whatever I find lying around, I'm going to use all of that and then take the next thing because I can't afford to rely on one gadget. And then shaky just means your guns are not going to fire where you think they should. So you have to stick to melee and gadgets. There's also a kind of inverse of that. There's weak, which means you're not strong enough to take anyone out in melee. So you have to use guns and gadgets. Obviously, these just apply a filter to all of the experiences you're going to have, all the tactics you're going to use, how you approach any given level. And if you look down this list and pick like one from each category and consider how those would combine, you can see pretty quickly how it all they interface with each other because they interface with the shuffling levels, and the shuffling levels are what we can vary cheaply. So yeah, in summary, this is shuffle-friendly game design. This is making elements that when all you have to do is rearrange them and interesting stuff happens. So design tools, obstacles, and filters with different effects, constraints, and freedoms that relate closely to what gets shuffled when a level is generated. And then your levels can be boring trash, just like mine. Thanks very much.
Okay, excellent. And I know we have just one extra slide from Tom to show here, yes, which is just some extra links and credits. Thank you, Tom, for being understanding as we deal with these technical issues.